Good Sunday afternoon, vinyl and music community. This is Chris. I thought I would do a, as they say, quick music update, recent finds and acquisitions. Not much of a theme here, other than just various things that I've picked up. But to start with, some recent videos that I had seen, just responses to those. One was Cosmic Pickle. Gary was doing one on solo and duo albums, and I think he'd mentioned this Ralph Towner and John Abercrombie album, 5 years later. So, two guitarists on ECM label. So I just thought I'd show that in response. And then Big Star 1000, Fred had done 60s psych or West Coast sound video. I think that's what it was. And one of the comments that a viewer had put was about the Charlatans. And so I pulled out my Charlatans reissue on, it says on Globe, but probably on Eva. Yeah, Eva. So this is a reissue of their 1966, 67 album. They were out of San Francisco, part of that sound up there, sort of country rockish, folkish, early rock. They originally had Dan Hicks, who Andrew at Tales from the Crate had done a undiscovered gem type video on him, Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks, and excuse me. He was in the band originally, but had left by the time, or wasn't included in this recording. Also has Mike Wilhelm, who later went on to join the Flaming Groovies. So, reissue of that. Now, the albums, the Antique Mall had recently got some new stock in for a change, and so the one vendor still got their $1. All records are $1, but they got some new ones in, so I picked this one up. The Sunshine Band, The Sound of Sunshine from 1975. So this is, I think, the first of the Casey and the Sunshine Band recordings, but he hadn't tacked his name on the beginning of it, just Sunshine Band. This is on the TK label out of Miami, and so this is an instrumental sort of soul funk or just funk type record, later to tend more towards disco or dance, but first Casey and the Sunshine Band. So that one of those things, I haven't intended to collect these, but ended up with the copy of this, Casey and the Sunshine Band from 1976. There's the inner cover, lots of group photos in action. Also on the TK Productions label, Casey and the Sunshine Band. And then Casey Solo Flight, Space Cadet. So Casey is his last name. Harry Casey's his actual name. So this is 1981 on the TK label. So got rid of the Sunshine Band and trying to make it on his own. Don't know if he got anywhere. Then some recent acquisitions. I picked this folk album up. Raun MacKinnon, which they say Raun is Danish for raven, but it doesn't really tie into anything. So this is on the cap label, white label promo, 1968. She's see her on the back, vocalist, guitarist. Recent piano record that I got, somebody had shown or made some reference to Edvard Grieg, Norwegian composer, and I noticed I didn't have much by him, so I picked this one up. This is a 1952 recording on Vox. 20 lyric pieces is the what makes up this album, played by the pianist Grant Johannesson. And there's the black and white Vox, or silver and black Vox label. Solo piano. And then I picked this one up at the Antique Mall. They had a palette of music that they hadn't put out yet, and I dug through part of it and came up with this. Great Masters of the Keyboard for $1. On Columbia, famous composers and pianists in their own history-making recorded performances. So this has Richard Strauss, Gustav Mahler, Alexander Scriabin, and Max Reger all playing the keyboards themselves. So on this early Columbia label, very tight, there we go. Blue Masterworks. And that same vendor, they used to have a little cubby hole in the dark that you couldn't see anything, and everything was just kind of crammed in there. They finally relocated to another upstairs booth that's right on a corner. Great access, great lights. It's right under the fixture. So, and they had some different stuff in there, or I never managed to dig far enough to get this. So this is a bluegrass album, 1964, I think. Bill Emerson and the West Virginia Mountaineers. This is on the MVM, or Mount Vernon Music label. So, little bluegrass. This was in pretty nice shape. They also had this one, 12-string guitar volume 2 by the Folkswingers. So this is an instrumental album. They're doing all these popular folk songs. You see a Dylan one's there up front. Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Kingston Trio did a version of that. Greenback Dollar. It's in the Shrink. Came from some place called Landsberg with price code C, which for this was $4.98. This is on the World Pacific label. And this includes Doug Dillard of the Dillards on guitar. I mean on banjo. So that was good. I had volume 1, but hadn't seen that one for a long time. And they also had this one, 12-string Dobro on World Pacific. Tut Taylor joins the Folkswingers. So Tut Taylor and Chris Hillman from the Byrds is also on here on mandolin. So that was another one. Very nice. I was surprised to find those in such good shape. And the other dollar-only vendor had this album, which I didn't recognize. Sahara is the artist, and the album is called Sunrise. This is on Peters International, which I didn't recognize the band or the label, but on the back it says that in this is a series called Cosmos. So in this Cosmos series, they mention other albums that have been released on it: Osana, Socrates, Secret Oyster, and the Gary Moore Band. So that convinced me to take a chance, spend $1. So prog rock pretty much is the general category. This is 1973 on that Peters International label. And I mentioned Cosmic Pickle earlier. I had worked out a trade with him, and I got this album from him, Anthony Davis, Middle Passage. So this is on Gramavision. '84, pretty much a solo piano. I think Gary has talked about this release. You see, it came from Crazy Eddie, price code E. And then back to the dollar vendor at the antique mall, I picked up this female rock record by Fanny. This is called Charity Ball. Didn't have any of their albums, but I did have this 145 that I've had for a while on Casablanca. Beggar Man backed with Butter Boy. This is from 1974. These are from the album Rock and Roll Survivors. So I had that 45, now I've got an album. Like I said, all female, fronted by the Millington sisters, June and Jean, and then Nikki Barclay and Alex DeBurr round out the band. So this is on this 10 Reprise label. And another dollar album, Gamma 2, started with Ronnie Montrose on guitar. This is in the shrink, so wherever the shrink ends, that's where the damage is. This corner has a little bit of something happened to it. But, so I think this is like 76, no, 1980. I guess Gamma 1 is 79. Red Electra. Got this folk album, British folk, the Young Tradition. This is called Galleries on Vanguard, this gold Vanguard label. One of the key members was Peter Bellamy. I've been getting some of his albums lately. In fact, I did pick up this CD only issue. This is 2 albums on one. First one is Peter Bellamy, which came out on vinyl in '75, but then The Fair Annie, which is the title of this, came out in around 1980, only on CD. This is a fell side recording. So folk with minimal accompaniment. Dave Swarbeck provides some fiddle on at least on one track, and other than that, Peter Bellamy concertina, and Chris Birch with fiddle and some accompanying vocals. And then I stopped at, they also had that same vendor. He used to only have vinyl, but he had a box of CDs that he got, so I picked up No Code from Pearl Jam for $1. I'd had the cassette version of this prior. Now I've got the CD version. Lots of folding. It's got a little packet of cards with it in addition to the CD. And then I went to the local library, and the branch has just recently added a used book section, and they had some CDs in there. So for 50 cents I picked up AC/DC Black Ice, which was nice. And this is something I picked up recently. The two pianos of Jeffrey and Ronald Marlowe. Classic Beatles and concert favorites. So one side is classical music, and the other side is their two piano interpretations of Beatles songs. Hey Jude, Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, Obla-dee, Obla-da, Here, There, and Everywhere, and Michelle. So I thought that was interesting for a reasonable price. And then some modern classical, Toru Takemitsu. This is as played by Roger Woodward, and Corona, Four Away, Piano Distance, and Undisturbed Rest are the 4 tracks. So one side is more piano-ish, and the Corona side is more electronics underpinning, and then some piano on top of it. So I was pleasantly surprised by how electronic it was on this red Decca label. And this came from Corvette's price code F, Toru Takemitsu. And I upgraded my cassette of the O'Kanes to this LP version. Columbia, so sort of pop country, kind of like Foster and Lloyd maybe. And picked up a Spanky and Our Gang, 1967 West Coast pop. Cheap copy of Steely Dan, The Royal Scam. ABC. Tim Buckley, Look at the Fool. I only had a digital copy of this before. Now I've got this vinyl version on Discreet. (1974). Solo Piano by the South African pianist Chris McGregor, Piano Song Volume 1. Hopefully I haven't shown this before. It's on the Musica label. He was also in, I think, in the Blue Notes and the Brotherhood of Breath. They relocated to England. So solo piano, jazz piano, Dollar Brand, another piano based on Sackville. This is African Portraits. Solo piano from Dollar Brand, or later Abdullah Ibrahim. Which reminds me, I did pick up Abdullah Ibrahim African Suite for trio and string orchestra. This is on the Enya label. 1998. And I think that was everything else. Well, one more CD. Amina Claudine Myers. This is a later one of hers, a group piece, In Touch, on Novus. I think this was a record club issue, BMG. So she plays keyboards, and then there's some accompanying synthesizer and two drummer, percussionists, bass vocals. I've got some of her earlier stuff, which is more piano and bluesy. This is kind of, I don't know, more soulful or less whatever I was expecting or hoping for. But you know, again, maybe a few more listens will swing me around. So something more recent that I picked up, Deadsy. I think this is their second album from 2002. Commencement is the album name. I think these are CD only. Key to Gramercy Park might be their radio song from here. Lake Warma Mog. That seems familiar, but maybe just because I've listened to it. And Cruella. So this is Elementary DreamWorks label. I had their first one. I've got a digital copy of it, but CD is very expensive to get. And I picked up this compilation of Billy Joe Shaver, so country stuff. This is the complete Columbia recording, so it includes 3 albums, long out of print albums by Billy Joe Shaver. I'm Just an Old Chunk of Coal, self-titled, and Salt of the Earth. So this is the 3 albums plus one non-LP B-side included in here, which is Love You Till the Cows Come Home. So this was on Real Gone Music from this compilation 2013. And that'll do it for that music update. So like I said, it wasn't very focused, but I picked up some interesting things that appealed to me, and hopefully everyone enjoyed that. So thanks everybody, and I'll see you later on.